I went to Zambia, like the first few days. Which I don't think is anymore. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, I feel like Eric Lesser went to end up going out. He told me he went on his interview or Mozambique or something, and they had a couple uncomfortable situations there, and I think that affected Rosh on the West Coast, at least in that area. Yeah, well, this is interesting timing because I dodged COVID for 2 years, and then 2 weeks ago got COVID. So like, I'm still like kind of, hopefully I won't have like a coughing
Okay, perfect.
Our department, I think, has been kind of
Okay, so we're going to get ready to start.
at the time, there was no emergency medicine as a senior. I trained in Northwestern. So I've been Chicago-based for a while. I always say Chicago's a good city to be stuck. No, I grew up in Central, but I moved to Chicago in like 2001. For my first job after I graduated, I expected to do the same. So at some point, you get to, I think it's okay to call a city like that's what I thought. Eventually, yeah, it's Chicago. Yeah, I mean, I think the only time people are going to get really into the weeds is also in Chicago, like what part are you from? And anywhere you go, like.
Got it?
The BLS folks are running late. So there's a group of about 15 students who are over there, and they won't let them go. So James is going over to see if he can say, you were supposed to be done a half an hour ago. Let him go.
Ready? Okay, so I'm going to take off my mask. Okay, this is not a fashion statement. This is me being too lazy to shave for the last few days, so, okay. So why don't we go ahead and start? So first of all, good evening, everyone. I'm Greg Gruner. I'm the Vice Dean for Education and Professor of Neurology and a 1979 graduate of Loyola Stritch School of Medicine. Now, usually Dean Mendez asked me if they even had white coats in that day or whether we wore animal pelts, but yes, we had white coats. Okay. I would like to warmly welcome the class of 2024 and your families and friends to our M3 white coat ceremony. The Alumni Board, the Stritch Alumni family, and the Office of Student Affairs and Educational Affairs are proud to sponsor this event, and we're happy to supply you with your first long white doctor coat. The Stritch School of Medicine has a long and proud tradition. We have graduated over 10,000 doctors in the past 111 years. There are over 6,600 living Stritch alumni, and we are all glad to celebrate with you as you officially don your white coats for the first time today. To begin our ceremony, I would like to introduce you to Ann Hillman. She's Director of Health Sciences Campus Ministry, who will be giving our invocation today. Ann?
So what a joy and privilege it is to be with you here today. And a delayed experience, but I think it actually comes at a really important and sacred time, which marks a moment in which you will move into immersing yourself in patient care. So as we begin our gathering this afternoon, let us pray. Good, gracious, and loving God, whom we call by many names, today we commend to you these third-year students moving into their next phase of training as they pursue serving your people through the practice of medicine. God, you have seen the sacrifice, fortitude, and perseverance that has brought them to this stage of medical school, and you have been with them through it all. We give thanks for their giftedness and dedication, for their willingness to answer this call to be healers and agents of change in the world. and we give thanks for all who provide support and encouragement to them on this path, both here in person today and those with us in spirit. Bless the class of 2024 as we celebrate this moment. Strengthen them in mind, body, and spirit as they strive to be healers among all those entrusted to their care. May they use the full scope of their intellect, reasoning, empathy, and energy in this most sacred pursuit. We ask all this in the name of God, who is one, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Anne, for that wonderful invocation. Now, we also have a keynote speaker, and it's a pleasure for me now to introduce you to Dr. Jason Pelmeter, who is a Stritch alumnus from the class of 2011. Dr. Pelmeter completed his 4-year emergency medicine residency at Northwestern McGraw Medical Center and is a fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians. He is a clinical assistant professor of medicine. He also is a mentor in PCM1 and PCM2, our patient doctoring courses, and more importantly, the clerkship director for the emergency medicine clerkship. Dr. Pelmeter practices primarily at the Loyola University Medical Center Emergency Department and also some of Loyola's urgent care centers. Dr. Pelmeter.
Take this off. First, thank you, Dr. Gruner, for a nice introduction. I also want to thank the educational deans, including Dean Mendez and his office, for inviting me to speak here today. When I got that invitation, I was surprised, a little humbled, and I figured that was probably a good thing. It meant that I haven't said or done anything too egregious since graduating Stritch, such that I got invited back to speak with you guys. So that's a good thing. As I was trying to think what to say to the new third years, you guys have already been here 2 years. I'm sure you've got a good lay of the land and a good understanding of what the preclinical years are like. I'm sure you've heard through the grapevine kind of what the clinical years are like. So I was really stretched to kind of think what I could offer for you. And as I was trying to think of these things, I kept going back to what was medical school like when I was here versus what is it like now. And some of the more obvious things, I think the tangible ones, the physical space that you guys study in and that I studied in, Stritch School of Medicine, of course. You guys just went through a bunch of renovations, or still going through a bunch of renovations on the 4th floor and the 1st floor that will ultimately turn that place into even better than what it is right now. I think one of the bigger ones that caught my attention as I was thinking about this was the School of Nursing, which I'm pretty sure was just a plot of grass when I was a medical student here, but is now an awesome facility, state-of-the-art, tons of study spaces, of course the Sim Center, if you haven't already been there, pretty awesome. I started to think about how educational content was delivered when I was a student and how it is now. And I'm not exaggerating when I describe this to you, but for every single course that I had, I would get this 4 or 5, maybe 6-inch packet of paper. Imagine that multiplied by 140 or 150 students, whatever it was at the time. And when I was done, when I got to graduation, I stacked it all up and it came up above the level of my hip. So now most of that content is delivered electronically, probably to the benefit of trees and forests around the world. I thought about how medicine itself had changed, and for some reason I kept thinking about Eliquis, you know, the novel oral anticoagulant, which was not FDA approved when I was a medical student. They probably talked about it in my pharmacology lectures, but we certainly weren't using it to the degree that, that we were back when I was a student, or now compared to now. When I was a student, to get an aortic valve repair was a lot more invasive, usually involved open heart surgery, because the less invasive approaches hadn't been yet approved by the FDA, nor was the first artificial pancreas, which was another big, cool technology change since I was a student here. So then I drifted off to the maybe more mundane parts of life that were different from when I was a student to now. And I can tell you, when I was a student, there was no TikTok. There was no Tinder. We didn't take selfies, and so in order to, if you were going to date, it wasn't going to be on an app probably, and you'd probably have to find a different way to market yourself. When I was a student here, the Chicago Cubs have been 100 years since they'd won the World Series. Netflix, I'm not that old, we did have Netflix, but the subscription at that time was $7.99, and now it is $15.49, so it's gone up a little bit. If you had an all-night study session and you wanted to get some food, you didn't want to have to cook yourself, I couldn't call Grubhub because they didn't deliver at that time, so it was either pizza, cook yourself, or figure something else out. If I wanted to call somebody or look something up on my phone, I couldn't ask Siri and Alexa because they didn't exist, so it was actually going through the phone and typing it all in yourself. If you, let's say you had a weekend off and you wanted to take your friends and family downtown, show them the city, you couldn't call an Uber because they hadn't launched yet in the city of Chicago. So you'd probably take the CTA, which of course did exist, and interestingly, the price of those tickets has only gone up by a quarter in that period of time. But you'd probably take it downtown and maybe go to like the John Hancock Center and take your friends and family to an observation center. Of course, the John Hancock has now been renamed after the address. I mean, it's like 900 North Michigan Avenue. So with all these things, it became clear to me that there's a lot of change going on, and some of that we might have been able to predict. Inflation, the price of the Netflix subscription, like it or not, inflation happens. I probably could have predicted that one. And maybe too, the disagreement of some diehard Cub fans. The Chicago Cubs winning the World Series might not have been as predictable as some of those other things. I don't think many people predicted a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic and the impact that that would have on nearly every facet of our lives. Particularly you students who would have otherwise had their white coat ceremony 2 years ago, but are now sitting here. And I certainly didn't anticipate being a provider with a bunch of other providers on the front lines of the global health crisis. But here we are, and that circled me back to what can I offer you as you are starting your clinical rotations. And I started thinking about predictions. And so I came up with a list of things that I think I can predict for each of the new M3s today as you guys go through your clinical rotations. Things that I think each of you will experience in one way, shape, or form. So, without any further ado, I'll start with number one. I predict the happiness that you'll feel the first time that you assist or watch a newborn delivery on your OB-GYN rotation. Number two, I predict the sense of accomplishment that you'll have when on your surgery or maybe surgery subspecialty rotation, your chief resident or attending will ask you to close the skin of a surgical site, and you'll do a beautiful running stitch despite the fact that your hands are trembling like you just had your 8th coffee, and you just sweat through all your scrubs and maybe even your surgical gown. I predict some frustration. I think that you're at one point going to go into a room and take an award-winning H&P, history and physical exam, interviewing your patients. It'll be so good that Dr. Boyle, your PCM instructor, would blush with pride. And then you will go to your attending, to your team, you'll relay all that information with an equally award-winning presentation. Everybody will walk back to the room, and you'll watch as that patient tells your attending the complete opposite thing that you just said. And I promise you, everybody has that. It's not a big deal. We get through it. Number four, I predict the camaraderie that you and your friends will continue to cultivate. The people who've had your back since the beginning of medical school will continue to, and will look out for you as you go through your clinical rotations. Number five, I predict some discomfort that you might feel the first time that you have to have a difficult discussion with a patient or their family about a poor prognosis. Number six, I predict the awe that you'll feel the first time that you participate in a resuscitation where you and your team restore the pulse of a patient who was just in cardiac arrest. Number seven, I predict the sadness that you might feel the first time that you experience the death of a patient that you and your entire team tried really hard to save. Number eight, I predict how physically and mentally restorative that golden weekend between your clerkship blocks will be, and how much you will appreciate good self-care, and how much you will realize that it's not a sprint, but that it's a marathon. Number nine, I predict some uncertainty this year as you are going through your blocks and trying to decide what are you going to do with your life, what type of physician do you want to be. And if you are one of those students who is lucky enough to have been born knowing that you will be type A, B, or C physician, then I will predict the uncertainty of figuring out who do you want to apply to, where do you want to go, who do you want to rank. And as a corollary to that one, for both of those types of students, I also predict the relief that you'll have when you finally land in that spot that's the right spot for you. And then lastly, but not least, I predict the confidence about 1 year from today when a second-year medical student or maybe a patient will ask you a medical question, and maybe even to your own surprise, you will answer it perfectly and realize, oh yeah, I have actually learned quite a bit of things in the last 2 years of preclinical and last year of clinical rotations, and you'll realize that you're one more step closer to becoming the physician that you set out to be. So all these experiences, all these feelings, the good ones, the not so good ones, they'll be formative, but embrace them. They will, again, make you the physician you're destined to be. So today, again, let's commemorate and congratulations for all the hard work you put into this point. I also wanted to recognize and commemorate the support of all of your friends, family, and guests here who have supported you to this point and who will continue to support you going forward. And I wanted to say good luck as you start this next chapter, and we all look forward to seeing you on your clinical rotations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pelmeter, for those great comments in the top 10. The next thing I'd like to do is introduce our dean. So I'd like to invite Dr. Sam Marzel, Dean of the Stritch School of Medicine, to share some thoughts with the class of 2024. Dr. Marzel?
Thank you, Dean Gruner. It's my pleasure to be with all of you today in person. This morning we talked to the M3s about the importance of the doctor-patient relationship and how when you are rotating on the various clerkships, decide which ones resonate the most with you and choose that one as your career, and you'll be very happy if you do so. This ceremony is extremely important. It's kind of like the transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly. You're transforming from book and virtual learners to clinical and experiential learners as you continue your medical education during your third and fourth year clerkships. To me, the history of why doctors wear the white coat is very interesting, and it really highlights the transformation of medicine into a modern scientific discipline. In the not so distant past, medicine and surgery were very primitive. Infection was the leading cause of death. Many patients went to doctors and hospitals as a last resort. There were no standards in medical education, basically until 1910 with the Flexner Report. Even though we knew about microorganisms when Dutch scientist Anton van Leeuwenhoek discovered microorganisms under the microscope, we didn't really know that they caused disease and infection and sepsis. And it wasn't until 1928 that we had antibiotics when they were discovered by Alexander Fleming at St. Mary's Hospital in London. In fact, our first president, George Washington, who was born in 1932, didn't die on a battlefield. He died of acute epiglottitis, which as an ear, nose, and throat infection, as an ear, nose, and throat doctor, we can cure nowadays with antibiotics and a tracheotomy. Back then, even though they know what a tracheotomy was, they considered it too risky, so they bloodlet him. They took out about half of his blood volume, and he unfortunately suffocated and died a miserable death. Doctors back then would wear dark jackets. The reason for that is they covered up. They wanted to be serious and somber. That was the mentality, but it also covered up the blood and pus that they would carry from room to room and patient to patient and not know that they were spreading disease. In fact, some doctors that tried to talk about this were ridiculed. Fortunately, they persevered, and gradually the concepts that they talked about were accepted. In fact, Dr. Semmelweis, who was a Hungarian physician who lived 1818 to 1865, He's now recognized as the father of hand washing. Back then, they didn't wash their hands. And it was when he was working in a maternity ward, he realized that the doctors had higher mortality than the nurses. In fact, 12% of the doctors' patients died because they were spreading infection from birth to birth to birth. The nurses and the midwives were washing their hands, and their infection was 2%. And he tried to tell people about this, but he was ridiculed, and he ended up ending up in a sanitarium and dying of a hand infection. He got sepsis from a hand infection. Louis Pasteur, who lived a little later, was a French chemist and microbiologist, and he studied germs. He was very interested in wine and fermentation, and he realized that bacteria could be destroyed by heating, and that's called pasteurization. He also invented the rabies vaccine, even though he didn't really know how it worked, but he invented that vaccine. One of my favorite sayings of Pasteur's is this: in the field of observation, chance favors the prepared mind. If you want a sports analogy, back in my day, Gary Player was a famous golfer, and he would say, the more I practice, the luckier I get. Finally, Joseph Lister, who was a Scottish surgeon and lived from 1827 to 1912, he's recognized as the pioneer of antiseptic surgery, and he used carbolic acid, which is coal tar, and he found that he could take the infection rate in amputees, which was 50%, and reduce it down to 2 or 3%, which was much more acceptable. Unfortunately, some of these doctors were not appreciated in the day, and later the techniques that they talked about were accepted. In fact, there's some famous paintings from back in the day. There's one from Thomas Eakins in 1865. It's called The Gross Clinic. You should all look it up. And Dr. Samuel Gross is operating in an operating room in Pennsylvania, and everybody's wearing black. There's no gloves, there's no masks. The patient was there, they were taking out a tumor. You can imagine he probably died from an infection postoperatively. 10, 20 years later, he does another painting called the Agnew Clinic, and this Dr. Agnew was believing in antisepsis, and they're all wearing white coats, and they're sterile, and they're washing their hands, and I would bet you that their patient had a better outcome. So at Stritch, we are one of the 4 medical schools in the United States rooted in Jesuit Catholic values. These values are central to our curriculum, how we teach, how we learn, and how we together build a community that models shared behavior. Specifically, there are 3 values that we believe shape our community and our behavior, and we believe these values will serve you very well now and in your future careers. These values, we believe, are kindness, altruism, and competence. First of all, kindness. Kindness in all things. This means patience, humility, collaboration, compassion, and being respectful in words and actions. These values align with Ignatius' presumption of good intention in all human interactions. Secondly, a spirit of altruistic service. Your ability to empathize with your patients and put yourself in their shoes and what they're going through in their disease process, and keeping your own interest on the back burner will serve you extremely well as you deal with patients and their families. This value is consistent with the Jesuit value of forming persons for others. Symbolically, this is reflected in the white coats you will soon don with the wolves and kettle crest, which is a symbol of generosity. And third, and finally, competence at the service of excellence. Stritch-educated physicians are lifelong learners who possess intellectual curiosity as they pursue excellence in knowledge and learn in the spirit of collaboration. There are procedures that I do or have done that I didn't learn in residency, that I had to teach myself to learn because the technology has continued to improve, and I'm able to stay up with that and offer that to my patients. That makes my patients healthier and makes me a better physician. This value is translated from the Jesuit value of a commitment to excellence in education and human conduct at the service of the world. So as you are coded, as you receive these white coats, I encourage you to practice, embrace, and hold dear these three values. They will help you become a great, rich, educated physician. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marzel, for those inspiring words. Well, it's nearly time. Okay, so the white coat, as we said, is a classic symbol of our profession. Doctors have been wearing them for over 100 years. The color of the coat is very cultural. And here at Loyola, you're going to see various specialties have different colors, for individual departments. Some will be gray, white. I used to wear blue because it matched my eyes. But all of you as medical students, you received your short white coat when you entered, okay, as M1s. But today you're going to receive your first long white coat, which you're going to wear on surgery and on the obstetrics and gynecology rotations. So as M3s, you begin the doctoring part of medical school, again, next week. Okay, I think you have Monday off because we're just kind and sweet. Okay, but you're going to begin them next week, and you're going to be learning from your mentors, your attendings, residents, and your peers. Okay, you will be with patients every day, sometimes when they're healthy and sometimes when they're sick. We hope you remember the responsibility you carry when you are wearing this coat, and even when you're not. And we hope you continually realize what a gift you are to those patients from which you both learn and serve. Even as a student, you will be with people at their most vulnerable times, when they are in pain, when they receive a difficult-to-hear diagnosis. You'll also be with people through births, deaths, procedures, surgery. Some of that's going to be scary. Some is going to be a little bit overwhelming. People will share with you their fears, their ailments, and worries, and they may have never shared with anyone before. We sincerely hope that you cultivate a heart full of empathy, steady, skillful hands, and a spirit full of humility and grace, as Dr. Marzel mentioned. Remember to acknowledge when you don't know something, okay, it's not step anymore, so that you may learn daily to better serve your patients, okay? So with this white coat, may you continually grow to be a better physician, one who is here to answer the call of serving others, okay? So I'm going to go through the instructions, okay? So let's all pay attention, okay? So we're going to start the ritual of the coating. Okay, now family members and friends, okay, we were going to be calling people up in rows which are sort of alphabetical. We've been putting people in and out. I think we still have 10 or 15 students who are redoing their basic life support, so hopefully they're back in. So we're trying to get everybody in here, but we'll get everybody up, okay? We'll call a roll up, okay, the roll will come up, okay, you deliver your coat to one of the coders, one of the attendings, one of the faculty, who are up there, okay? When you give them the code, you're going to turn around, you're going to face that way, okay, so that your family can take pictures. Now, if family want to take pictures, okay, I think they're still working. Okay. Okay. So then when you call you up, we'll have you turn around. Your coder's going to put your coat on. Then you can go back down. We'll get you back down to kind of sit down again. Then we'll bring up the next roll. Okay. Now, really, now's the time when I want to invite Dean Martinez, Dean Nauert, who's way over there. Okay, and Mrs. Lupi Zarco, who's right in the middle. Okay, so we're going to start now. If I goof up your name, okay, so I'm just going to be announcing the first and last person in a row, is because I'm as nervous as you are. Okay, so I'm going to try to do the best I can. Okay, so the first row that's going to come up, let me have our coders kind of come up. Okay, so you all step on the stage. Okay, so we're all set. So I'm going to call up the first row of students. Okay, it's going to be from Adami to Beirut. So let's bring the first group up. Going to come up. Find somebody to give your coat to. wait, don't sit down yet. Okay, very good. So now we're going to bring up our next row. Okay, we'll let all the students go back down to sit down. And that's going to be from Bonfante Gonzalez to Shannon. Okay, once you get your coat on, turn around, face the group, family can take pictures. So family can see. Okay, so row 3 is going to be Chaudhry to Deng. Remember, you can come all the way down, too. Multiple coders, no waiting. Great. Okay, those family pictures in there. Okay, we can sit down. Going to bring up our next row. Again, in the center. There you go. Okay. Dunwoody to Farley. Okay, so come all the way down. Don't be ashamed. Okay, great. Okay, in the middle. Okay, great. So go through the middle. Okay, it'll be Ferris to Hakeem. Okay. Okay, great. Let's bring up the next group. Okay, Hamill to Jang. Yeah, go through the middle. So for parents, this is like the first day of surgery orientation too. So just, we're getting it, we're there. Okay, so coax out the promised Lee. Okay, very good. You can sit down now. So we have Yunmin to Meltzer. Yunmin Lee to Meltzer. Okay. Okay. We're going to bring up Malloy to O'Hagan. Okabe to Payman. Rajva to Grishma Reddy. Okay, we now ready to Sandhu. CDO to Sridharan. Aristide Titatura. Shan to Hannah Wang. And Jeffrey Wang to Zelch. Now we have our last group of students who I think were doing BLS, but they're all here now, I think. Maybe up. Not alphabetical. And I think we got everybody. So I want to thank our coders. Will you please sit down? But I want the class of 2024 to stand. Okay, great. So keep standing. Okay, now the only time you ever had so many pictures taken of you when you probably were born. Okay, but many people have helped you to get to this point on your journey to becoming a physician. Hopefully many were able to join us today. So let's take a moment to please applaud all of those who have supported you along the way to you becoming a student physician. So thank all of you. So you have to keep standing. okay? Well, you're not yet physicians. It's not too early to make a commitment to displaying the behaviors and fulfilling the responsibilities of our profession. At this time, I ask all the physicians in the audience to please stand and join the class in reciting the oath of Hippocrates found on the back of the program. Whoops. Okay, and I'll start us off, okay, but you got to say it with me, okay? I solemnly pledge to myself to consecrate my life in the service of humanity. I will give to my teachers the respect and gratitude which is their due. I will practice my profession with conscience and dignity. The health of my patient will be my first consideration. I will respect the secrets that are confided to me. I will maintain by all the means in my power the honor and the noble traditions of the medical profession. My colleagues will be my brothers and sisters. I will not permit considerations of religion, nationality, race, party politics, or social standing to intervene between my duty and my patient. I will maintain the utmost respect for human life from the time of conception, even under threat. I will not use my medical knowledge contrary to the laws of humanity. I make these promises solemnly, freely, and upon my honor. You can please sit. So I just have a few brief announcements before we conclude our ceremony today. First, we'd like to thank all of those who have joined us to celebrate the moment in these students' lives. These physicians in training wouldn't be here today without your tireless love and support. Events such as this one are the hard work of a great many people. I would like to take a moment to thank Catherine Jardine, Rachel Davis, Deans Mendez, Martinez and Nauert, Lupi Zarco, the Student Affairs staff, Naomi Gitlin and the Loyola marketing staff, and all of our housekeeping and maintenance staff. Please join me in thanking all of those who helped make today possible. So, Stritch class of 2024, you now all have your white coats and you've taken the oath of Hippocrates. Today symbolically begins your clinical journey to becoming a physician. All of us as individuals and as a profession have had a tremendous few years of growth and learning through hardship. It has become more clear to me than ever before that we and you now carry a sacred responsibility to role model compassion, respect, kindness, and leadership towards equity. Later, when you look up in the wall in the atrium, you see a quote from St. Matthew. I was ill and you cared for me. It doesn't say I was ill and you cured me. Sometimes in your career as physicians, you will cure. But in the words of Theodore Roosevelt, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. We are incredibly humbled by your accomplishments, your dreams and hopes, and your idealism and enthusiasm. Each of you inspires us to be better doctors, teachers, and people every day. Therefore, Loyola University Chicago Stritch School of Medicine, class of 2024, on behalf of the Alumni Board and the faculty and that little guy back there, and the staff at the Stritch School of Medicine, I wish you the best of luck as you begin your clinical training next week. Congratulations, all of you. So now you're all free spirits. So enjoy, but show up tomorrow. Thanks, buddy. Great job.
I was just, when you said that, I was like, I was trying to remember because there was a couple in